So let's pick up where we left off. We have a song and we have a theme. So now we're going to go over the features of the editor. So let's start with this timeline down here. This is where you're going to put all of the obstacles and objects in your level. The term for obstacles in the game is objects. So I call this the object timeline. You can move along the timeline by moving this blue marker at the top here. The game automatically makes an object that the level starts with because all levels have to have at least one. To make a new object, you put your marker where you want your new object to be, and you click the Object button. Up here, you can choose what kind of object you want. It doesn't really matter what you choose since you can always change it later on. You have normal objects, which act as normal objects that you have to avoid, decoration objects that don't hurt you, helper objects that act as warnings, empty objects that are invisible, and persistent objects that last until the end of the level. I'm just going to go ahead and click normal. And there we go, we have our new object. I'm just going to go ahead and click my new object. To delete the object, all you have to do is click it and press the delete button on your keyboard. But right now, I have this big menu full of all of this object's customizable properties, and I'm going to break each of these down as I go along. So let's start with the box up here. Up here, you can change the name of your object, and you can also choose whether your object is a helper, a decoration, or if it is empty. This used to be a series of checkboxes, but now it's in the form of a drop-down menu. If you click Helper, your object would turn transparent. Helpers are the things you put before actual obstacles so you can warn the player of an attack. Decoration means the object is visible, but it can't hurt the player. Selecting Empty makes the object empty. It's still there, it just can't hurt you, and you can't see it. The start time is when the object starts existing. You can change it by using your mouse to drag the object back and forth along the timeline. You can use these arrows, or you can just type in a time if you want. This setting right here is why you don't see the object currently when you put the marker over it. This used to be called auto kill, and it worked very differently, but now it's called time of death. This controls when the object disappears. You can give it a fixed number of seconds, a specific song time, or your own time, depending on what you want to do. You can also make your object disappear on the last keyframe. We're going to learn about keyframes later on. But right now, if I select fixed time, and I type in 5 here, the object will disappear after 5 seconds. As you can see, I have a red square in the middle of the screen now. Right below time of death is parenting. This is what you use to attach objects to other objects. This is also how you make obstacles appear in the same place as their warnings, or a way to make a boss character out of many different shapes. Object origin basically changes where the origin of your object is. Clicking this button would basically move the center of this square all the way to the right, and clicking this button would move the center to the top. So both at once would move the origin of the square into the top right corner. But right now, I'm going to keep the origin in the center. Down here, you can change the shape of the object. You have squares that you can hollow out, circles which you can hollow out or make semicircles, triangles which you can also hollow, arrows, text, which can't hurt you, but you can use as decoration, and hexagons, which you can hollow out. Anyway, for this example, I'm just gonna stick with a square. This slider here, called render depth, basically controls the object's depth. That just means, should this object be over other objects or under them? Just as an example, I made this object in a different color. So right now, these objects' depths are the same. But if I turn this slider down, the red square goes under the blue square. If I turn it back up, it goes over the blue square. That's basically how depth works, but I'm going to keep the slider in the middle for now. Now, if you scroll down, there are 2 settings down here that control the editor layer and the editor bin. This first one can control what layer your object is on. This is connected to these 5 buttons above the object timeline. These represent the 5 different layers of the object timeline. You can use these to organize your objects so they're not all cluttered up in the same layer. It doesn't really matter which one you put it in, just as long as you think it's organized enough. So if I go to my object and I click 2, my object disappeared from the first layer, but it now is on the second layer. Clicking 3 will move it to the third layer. It's pretty simple, but I'm going to keep it on the first layer. Now as you can see, when I drag this object along the timeline, I can't move it up or down. That's what the editor bin slider is for. You just slide this thing back and forth, and it moves the object up and down on the timeline. This is also for organizing your objects. Again, it doesn't matter which one it's in. You can also hold Shift and drag the object up and down. Some other features that help are this final layer, the event/check layer. If we click it, we go to a completely different timeline that I briefly went over in the last tutorial. And this is where you can add a bunch of different effects to your level, like moving the camera around with zoom, rotation, position, theme, and all this stuff. And I covered all of this in my effects tutorial. And at the very bottom here are the checkpoints. These are the things that you pass, so that if you die, you just restart at the last checkpoint you crossed. You can add a new checkpoint where your marker is by clicking checkpoint. That creates a new checkpoint where your blue slider is. You can move around the checkpoint with these arrows or using the scroll wheel, and this will control where your player respawns when it dies. And you can name it if you want. And if you don't want the checkpoint there, you can just click it and press delete on your keyboard. The button next to the checkpoint button is the marker button. This is where you can just add markers. If you click that, it adds a marker to the timeline. I like to add these markers to the beat of the music so I can sync the objects better. You can change their colors, give it a name and description, and to delete them, all you have to do is right-click it once. This last button that says BG adds these various little pulses in the background. Pressing open opens the menu of all of them, and pressing create creates a new one. And as you know, these things will grow and shrink to the beat of the music, and you can edit each one so that you can change around their size, their color, and whether or not they grow to the bass or the treble or whatever. The default level screen starts with a ton of these, and in this current version, the only way to delete them is to click them and press delete one by one. But they are very good for decorating your level. So those were the main features of the editor. And in the next tutorial, I'm going to go over how to make an object do stuff.